Hillary has been lengthening her excuses as to why she lost the election. She didn't really lose the election. It was stolen from her by, I think it's up to 24 different excuses she has now. Number 24 is content farms in Macedonia. And as I said, my grandfather was a Macedonian content farmer, and we often think about, gathering on the porch and recalling the old days on the Macedonian. He never thought that the old content farmers he left behind in Macedonia would one day steal the U.S. presidential election. They are gnarled, hard-working Macedonian peasants, and the way they were able to reach out and...
Zoran Zaev still thinks he is important and loved by the Western elites who essentially installed him so that he could engineer a, what we would call, temporary name change. And yet the invitations to glamorous locations and events has come to a full stop for him. And that is because he is no longer needed by those Western progressive elites. He can now be summarily dismissed. Which is probably why he and the Zaev family are now focusing on their personal business interests in Macedonia. After all, if he is no longer useful to the internationals and will no longer be praised by them, he might as well focus on continuing with making as much money as he can off the backs of Macedonians, primarily through his marijuana business, but also through regular corruption opportunities and more. Speaking of corruption, Macedonia is not doing so well. The latest Global Perceptions Corruption Index from Transparency International found that Macedonia continues to slip and, along with Bosnia-Herzegovina, has the worst score in the Balkans and ranks 106th out of 180 countries and is tied with Albania, also at 106. Last year, Macedonia was at 93rd place. It is worth noting that in 2015, Macedonia was ranked at 66, 40 places higher. We'll discuss all of this and more on this episode of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. I'm Jason Miko, coming to you once again from the foot of the Catalina Mountains in Oro Valley, Arizona.
And this is Cvetin calling in from Skopje, Republic of Macedonia. And this concludes our short streak of podcasts which we recorded in Skopje while Jason was actually here. Now we are again recording this on a huge time difference over a crappy Wi-Fi connection.
Well, Sven, that was great fun being there, and I so much enjoyed it being there for Christmas and just getting to visit with you and your family and other friends and families. And I arrived back here, let's see, we're recording this on Friday, January 24. We missed one in there last week, and I was traveling back last Sunday. I arrived Sunday night. My luggage arrived Monday night.
As long as it arrived.
It arrived, and it arrived intact. I always worry because, I've got mastica and rakia and vino in there, and it was all intact. Customs, I did declare it. You didn't say anything in Chicago when I landed there, so it was all legal. But it arrived intact, and of course now I'm coming down, I think, with a sore throat and maybe a cold, but so I won't be imbibing for a little while. But anyway, great trip, great to be with you, great to record there. Now we're back to our regularly scheduled program.
It was great having you here after quite a while, honestly.
Yeah, it had been 15 months since I had been there, which is the longest time I've been away in 24 years.
That's long.
But between our last podcast, which again, this is Friday, so I think we recorded it early the following week, the previous week. Sorry, there's been a lot going on. Let's call this the rank punditry episode, because there's just so much to discuss.
Everybody up with events.
Yeah, starting with that corruption index. So Zoran Zaev and his ministers, his party, and his friends in Dewey, Ali Ahmeti, campaigned on an anti-corruption program, and yet Macedonia is full of corruption. What's that all about?
Yeah, I don't know how this drop in the rankings happened. I mean, it's not like we had a major corruption scandal involving precisely the person who was supposed to fight corruption, who instead abused her office to stage a coup and then steal it's estimated about 20 million euros were stolen by Katica Janeva. This is the estimate, obviously shared with Zaev and the SDSM party, and Zaev is incidentally also worth about 200 million is the estimate. Strangely, greatly enlarged over the past several years. He's been prime minister, so they really gave Transparency International a lot to work with, and I didn't really go deep into the report, but everything that's in there is true and much more.
Yes. Yes. Well, yeah, again, and I think as we pointed out there in the monologue, Macedonia was at 66, I believe, just a short 5 years ago, under a different government, and it continues to slip and is the worst in the Balkans, tied with our friends next door in Albania. So that's, so a series of bad news for the current government just came out over the past couple of days. That was one, Transparency International. Another one was, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong here, The Economist magazine, or they like to call themselves a newspaper, which is odd because it's actually a magazine. But anyway, and they are a center-left publication, but they came out and with some sort of democracy rankings for the world, and they called Macedonia a quote hybrid regime.
They gave this designation to Macedonia under Gruevski, and this was a big deal when the U.S. Embassy and the British Embassy were pushing this relentlessly, that you're no longer a democracy, you're no longer a democratic country, and obviously Zaev's people would push this relentlessly as a huge, warning sign for the country. And now, under them, like 3 years under them, with this total abuse of the judiciary and everything that comes with it, and we remain. I think we've actually even deteriorated on the democracy index as well, and both of these indexes, which were used by Zaev in the past, both show who have. I mean, The Economist has been extremely friendly to him, openly supportive of the name change, trying to butter it up as they went along, and but still, I mean, if they can't conceal the fact of what's been going on in Macedonia, which corruption we've discussed, prosecutor turns out to be the biggest crook in the country, prime minister turns out to be a marijuana smuggler, inter alia, among other many things. In terms of democracy, we have maybe about a third of the members of parliament from the opposition are being prosecuted on various charges, and none from the ruling majority, obviously, and they're being tactically arrested and released from prison in order to, pressure them to vote one way or another. I mean, this is, now we have earned it. If under Gruevski it was a political ploy to say that Macedonia is not a democratic country, it's a corrupt country, now we have actually earned this inglorious distinction.
Right. Yeah. Well, two things on that Economist magazine point. First of all, it's worth noting, as you mentioned, that the Economist has been quite friendly to Zaev and his regime, because obviously the Economist, being a kind of quote-unquote globalist media outlet, very much wanted Macedonia to change its name as well. And I noticed when I came through the airport the other day in Vienna, picked up a copy of it. I wouldn't pay for such a thing, of course. It was in the lounge, and read one of the articles about Macedonia, Albania enlargement, etc. And naturally, of course, the Economist magazine calls the Macedonian people the quote-unquote North Macedonians. So that's point number one. Strike number many strikes against them for their reporting. But second, on the hybrid regime, I think it's worth reading here verbatim what the Economist says about hybrid regimes. And they say, quote, elections have substantial irregularities that often prevent them from being both free and fair. Government pressure on opposition parties and candidates may be common. Serious weaknesses are more prevalent than in flawed democracies. In political culture, functioning of government and political participation. Corruption tends to be widespread and the rule of law is weak. Civil society is weak. Typically, there is harassment of and pressure on journalists, and the judiciary is not independent, unquote.
Civil society is actually too strong.
I was going to make that point, but I wanted to finish reading the quote. That's an interesting point there. But anyway, so let's just keep moving on, because we're doing ranked punditry here. We got a lot to go through. Corruption, hybrid regime from The Economist, and the fact that The Economist thinks that the people of Macedonia are called North Macedonians. Next item, lowest wage rise in the region. So another one of the various institutions in the region recorded or noted the number of the wage increases in the region. Macedonia came in at the lowest at only 3.8%. I think Bulgaria and Serbia were both around 10% or higher. I guess it's worth noting, Cvetin, that wages did rise in Macedonia, but not at the rate that the government of Zoran Zaev has been promising all these years, and combine that with the fact that his election campaign is based on he wants another 4 years so that he can focus on the economy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have the lowest wages, one of the lowest wages in Europe, definitely, and we're in the same economic zone with the European Union. We trade with them freely, and people can move freely. So, it would be criminally negligent if from this low base we did not have a solid wage growth. We have some growth. It's impossible, I mean, short of a full war, which is coming, to not have a growth in wages in Macedonia if you're part of the European economic zone, which we are, but under a different, proper conservative, properly free marketeering government, which would maintain the rule of law, unlike Zaev, who is, rapidly corrupt. Wages would grow much, much faster. I mean, it's an insult to compare ourselves to Albania or Kosovo or countries like that, and they have a higher growth rate at this point than we do.
Right. No, it's worth noting that if the government of Macedonia actually adopted a free market capitalist model, wages would rise. And I'm wondering now, as I look at this infographic and the fact that wages rose by the lowest amount in the region, I wonder if that takes into account the fact that the government has been increasing minimum wage, pensions, hiring public sector employees and things like that.
Yeah, definitely.
That's not real, actually. I mean, that's all government public sector spending.
Yeah, and borrowing like crazy to pay the public sector in this pre-election period, which also influences the result.
Exactly, right. Well, that was a third piece of bad news that came out for Zoran Zaev and his government. Although we should point out again that he's not actually the prime minister right now. Oliver Spasovsky is the current interim technical prime minister, but we all know that Zoran Zaev is still the power behind the throne, along with his partner in crime, quite literally, Ali Ahmedi. Yeah. Which leads us to the next subject, marijuana, Mary Jane. So this is something that Zoran Zaev and his family, first of all, they have a lot of business in growing cannabis.
Yeah.
And they have also, the government of Macedonia under Zoran Zaev has also granted, I think up to, was it 31 licenses to open up these marijuana facilities, greenhouses?
Plantations,
thank you.
To start planting the stuff, yeah.
Right.
They're licensing the plantations. There are about 30 plantations, and about 5 or 6 licensed distillers that are supposed to make the cannabis oil.
Right. Now, under the previous government, I believe there had been a few licenses granted, but it was in the single digits. Yeah. And so this has exploded, quite literally. And the licenses aren't cheap, are they?
No. Well, you have to meet some technical requirements to do this.
Right.
But the unofficial price, which is being set, because these are all people like Zaev's a lawyer opens one. Zaev's bishop, the bishop of Strumica, Bishop Naum opens another. Zaev's cousin has the biggest one. Zaev brings in this Canadian Big Mike businessman to promote this. Zaev's business partner in Strumica has a marijuana plantation with a guy in Serbia who was recently arrested for doing what all of these guys are obviously doing, which is not growing the marijuana which is used to make the oil and then distilling the oil, but in fact they're using the potent marijuana which is used for smoking, and they're selling it on the black market. This is no-brainer. Everybody knows this by now.
Yeah.
Vimera said this at a press conference today. Almost no cannabis oil has been exported, and all of this is just like a paravan for actual growing of marijuana for smoking and for exporting it into Europe. So the actual price for having a license to do this was today put by Vimera Secretary General Igor Yanushev at between 300,000 and 500,000 euros. This is the black market price which you pay Zaev if you want him to give you a permit to grow marijuana legally and then sell it illegally.
Right. Yeah, so I think we should point out, the idea of growing cannabis to produce oil, which has apparently some medicinal uses, and I'm not going to, quibble with that. And I haven't studied it that much, but I do believe that it does have some medicinal uses as cannabis oil. Once you take out the chemicals and the elements that create the high effect, I believe. Again, I'm not totally up on this, but what you're saying is that they're taking this and they're actually using the potent stuff and then selling it on the black market, which is bad on many different levels. It's bad for the individuals that are buying this on the black market. It's bad for the government. It's bad for corruption. Bad for the economy, etc. So, but this is something that Zaev, and as I mentioned in the monologue, that apparently since he ain't going nowhere, he ain't going to Davos and other places, other fancy places. He's the invitations have stopped. The Nobel Prize was a no-go. And so he might as well focus on making money however he can, as fast as he can, hand over fist, to at least enjoy. Yeah, while he can, to enjoy his life there. So
he shockingly proposed this law to legalize selling the buds, the flowers of the marijuana, which is the actual, the ganja, the smoking stuff. And he was doing this while we were awaiting this European Union Council to decide whether we will be allowed to open EU accession talks. And the law was proposed under the European flag formula, which is only put in place in instances where the Macedonian parliament needs to adopt a law which is specifically an EU-related law, which aligns our judiciary with that of the European Union. And this allows the government, the ruling majority in parliament, to push the law faster with a shortened period for debating. And this was meant for the EU, not for legalizing your own drug business. But Zaev was doing this while he was begging for the EU accession date, and everybody realized at this point that something is off. You do not do this. I mean, he's losing he's abandoning any attempt to make pretenses that things are run legal in the country. And people basically realized that this is the big deal. He got a lot of money for himself, for his partners, and also for businesses who paid him for the right to grow marijuana, but the business is not profitable without, exporting it illegally on the black market as the dried stuff. And he now demands a right to legally produce and export the buds. And I guess, he's afraid, I suppose, that you can just, uproot the potent stuff and then replant the industrial cannabis overnight. I guess at this point, he's afraid that soon there's going to be an inspection looking into all these plantations and realizing they're not growing the stuff they declared they would be growing, and they'll all go to prison. So now he wants to legalize the illegal business in case, people go snooping around soon after the government is changed.
Yeah, wow. And, you mentioned the Macedonia, the EU, etc. I think it's worth pointing out as well that a report just came out from the European Stability Initiative, basically saying that Macedonia and the other countries of the Western Balkans will not be in the European Union anytime before 2030. So we're still waiting for the EU to come out with its new enlargement strategy. It was supposed to come out, I think, this week. It's now going to come out in February. They're still squabbling amongst themselves and trying to figure out what the best way forward is. And in the meantime, I guess we wait on that.
I'm not holding my breath, honestly.
Yeah, well, there are other alternatives, despite what Zoran Zaev and others say when they say that there is no alternative to the European Union. There actually are other alternatives to making your economy grow and making your economy strong instead of waiting on the EU. So,
well, my passive-aggressive answer here is, well, now you forced us to change the name, so now we demand this EU accession, and once we're in, we're going to go full Visegrad on you guys. But in reality, yes, I mean, a fair, splitting the difference would be we join NATO. Hopefully, the EU gives us a clear no. I mean, they're such duplicitous, so they will never give us a clear no. But hopefully, we have that thing resolved, and then we just go back to reverting to our old name and gaining NATO membership and abandoning the quest for the European Union membership.
Sure. Yeah, I think, taking a quick break from our rank punditry and list of woes, have befallen Macedonia currently in the past week alone. I think it's worth noting that Macedonia is going to be in NATO very soon. It's not going to be in the EU. So you get in NATO, you change the name back, you find a third way towards making Macedonia prosperous and creating jobs and wealth and things like that. And it's not quite as simple as that, but that's the overall. I think that should be the overall goal and vision for Macedonia and for the next government, whoever that is.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Zaev's campaign is now reduced to, besides promising that next 4 years he will focus on the economy, he's now scaremongering the people that if VMRO wins, they're going to block, they're going to revert to the old name, and this would make us lose NATO membership, which, as you wrote in your editorial, is... but this is what Zaev's campaign is now reduced to, honestly.
Right.
He's got nothing.
Yeah. So Zaev is saying that. Radmila Shekarinska, the defense minister, is saying that. They're using scare tactics, saying that if VMRO is elected and starts work on its pledge to change the name back to Macedonia's only rightful and true name, then Macedonia will be kicked out of NATO, which is not possible. There is no mechanism within NATO to kick a member out. If there was, Turkey already would have been kicked out. So once you are in the club, you are in the club, and that is that.
Yeah.
So what Zaev is saying and what Radmila Shekarinska is saying is quite simply a lie. Macedonia will be in NATO soon. Once it's in NATO, you can focus on things like changing the name back, EU issues aside, and go forward. But yeah, you're right. That's what they're going to try and that's their only thing besides trying to say that they're going to help the economy, which we know they can't.
That's all he's got, though.
Yeah. So now, switching back here slightly, when I was in Skopje, I noticed there was no snow. A lot of people told me, wow, there's no snow. There's been no snow. And yet the mayor of Skopje has signed a recent contract for several €100,000 to remove the snow. What's that all about?
No, it's up to $1 million by now, and he pays. That's just to have the machines stand by, and then he would pay them more if they actually cleaned up something. And so far, for the entire year, for the whole of Skopje, which includes even some hills and more rural regions, they clocked in like 40 hours of work, which is nothing. So they're going to be paid €1 million for literally nothing. No wear and tear, no work, nothing. And the mayor was asked today, well, is anybody going to be held responsible over this? And he says, well, I'm not a Nobel Prize winning scientist to be able to predict if snow is going to fall when I was signing the contract. And then people told him, well, yeah, but you don't have to be a Nobel Prize scientist to have a clause in the contract that says that if the company does no work, it pays back half or 2/3 of the money, and just just hire the company which already has the plows. And if they do no work, I mean, they do no work. They pay just pay them like 100,000, not $1 million.
Right. Wow. Yeah. Not a bright individual, is he?
Yeah.
So, well. Moving on, the draft law on public prosecutor. I know that today, again, this is Friday, January 24, and we're recording this, there's been some movement. They were supposed to have a meeting between the two leading parties to talk about this. They met, then I think
it fell apart quickly.
Walked out, because Citizen wouldn't meet, some of the requests. Look, compromise actually is not a dirty word. In some cases, in a case like this, both sides have things that they want, they bring to the table. Citizen can't meet the minimum of what the world requires. And so there is no draft law on the public prosecutor right now. Now the EU is running around saying if you don't have a draft law on the public prosecutor before the elections, then the world as we know it will end. Yeah. And that is simply not true, because they said the same thing last fall before. They keep saying the same thing every time. It's always something. So anyway, that's not going. Yeah.
It's worth remembering that when Janeva was arrested in August, and then obviously everybody assumed that her entire case load collapses because she's arrested for a crime which actually points to the actual purpose of her opening criminal cases: corruption, going after businessmen to extort money from them, and political abuse. Clearing away VMRO people so Zaev can grab power, so then she could go back to point number one, which is corruption. So her entire scheme, her entire campaign is corrupt and should be thrown out. What SDSM demanded, because if this happens, they're destroyed. I mean, they can't stand to VMRO unless they have a crooked prosecutor on their side filing ludicrous charges against VMRO people. So now they had Katica, while in prison, sent a letter dismantling the special prosecutor's office and giving the cases to another Zaev loyalist, public prosecutor Ljubomir Joveski, in exchange, I suppose, for lenient treatment for her. And, imagine if VMRO had just dismantled the special prosecutor, what the European Union reaction would be. Reaction to this was crickets, because obviously most of the EU diplomats agree with SDSM and with Zaev. But also it's obviously illegal. You cannot, a prosecutor once arrested loses all power. She can't interfere in her own cases.
Yeah.
She's still got some rights. We're not savages to that point. But she can't, I mean, theoretically, we're joking that she could file criminal charges against prosecutor Vilma Ruskovska, who was prosecuting her, and put Vilma Ruskovska in prison. And this is not far out of Yaneva's mindset. I mean, I'm pretty sure she thought about this. So there is a law that once you're a prosecutor, you can't file criminal charges because you would go against the policeman who arrested you, the witness who will testify against you, the prosecutor who is charging you. I mean, and let alone being allowed to dismantle an entire office of the prosecutor's service. I mean, and SDSM, once this was done, and everybody was like, oh, come on. And SDSM said, no, this is a good solution. This solution will stand, and we no longer have to negotiate with VMRO on anything. We resolved the crisis in the Special Prosecutor's Office, and now we're carrying on arresting VMRO people, and the only other special prosecutor is Vilma Ruskovska, and she's also on our team, and she's not going to arrest any of us. So for us, case closed, time to move on. But last week we had the European Enlargement Commissioner Varhelyi from Hungary, and he, after his visit, suddenly Zaev is all running around in circles. No, we have to pass the law immediately. Parliament dissolves on February 12th or 11th, whatever. We have to do this immediately. We're going to lose our EU accession date. And people were telling him, well, yeah, but just like a few months ago, you were saying that the problem was resolved with Katica's handwritten letters from prison. They were not stamped, nothing.
That defies, yeah.
And obviously, somebody's tightening the screws on Zaev on this issue.
Well, of course, yeah. I mean, the whole thing quickly descends into a Monty Python skit almost. And we should mention the late Terry Jones, one of the Monty Python members, passed away the other day. So, as the Monty Python guys would say, 2 down, 4 to go. So,
John Cleese was recently in Bulgaria, and I caught the ads for the event, and the title was "Come see me while I'm still alive, while you still can." I like that. Their irreverent, self-deprecating humor, etc. Something that the government of Zoran Zaev certainly doesn't have. But we're talking about Katica and the draft law, etc., which should lead us back to the racket cases. Haven't seen a lot in the news lately. Whose name we really haven't heard lately is Boki 13. Is he still alive? Has he been Epsteined? Still alive, the best as we know, and something is going to happen tomorrow, I'm expecting. We're recording this on Friday, so it will fall by the time this airs, and not sure what, but we're expecting Boki's shoe to drop. We were supposed to hear from one of Yaneva's chief deputies, Lila Stefanova, who is also corrupt, but unlike Katica, apparently much more competent, and she was the driving force behind some of the cases. So she was supposed to testify, but her hearing keeps getting postponed, and there is obviously something here. She hasn't been obviously, managed or handled well prior to giving her testimony. So twice now we are postponing the testimony because Yaneva's lawyers keep getting sick, both of them, both Ljubomir Frčkovski's wife and the other lawyer she has, so the trial cannot continue. So something is happening here, and it should happen soon.
Huh. All right. Well, listeners, stay tuned. You heard it here first. Okay, well, yeah. Those anyway. Again, as we've said many times on this podcast, and as we've written, the racket cases are just a slow drip of bad news for Zoran Zaev and his government, and I can't imagine why he enjoys seeing them go on. I think he thinks that they're just going to go away if they stop talking about it and try and bury it, so to speak, which kind of goes along with the Epstein reference.
Yeah.
But anyway, right. Let's see. What else do we got here? Oh, general crime and lawlessness across the country. Again, Cvetin, I've been involved in Macedonia since 1996. So in May, which is my anniversary date when I first set foot in the glorious Republic of Macedonia. So after that, I will be able to say that I'm in my 25th year. And in all that time, setting aside, the 1999 NATO bombing and all of that, the 2001 war, etc., 2015, things of that nature. Frankly, in all the time that I was there, until recently, the idea of general crime and lawlessness across the country just wasn't an issue. As I like to say, over in Bulgaria, they shoot and kill their oligarchs. That should be a tagline for Macedonia. At least we don't come to Macedonia. At least we don't kill our oligarchs. But I just saw today there's another incident of some violence in a hospital in Tetovo. A woman was assaulted in Strumica.
That happens all the time.
Another
the best
missing.
Case. The best case was actually the mayor of Šuto Rizari, Kurto Duduš. He's from the SDSM party. So during the elections in 2017, his opposing candidate, Elvis Bayram, the son of Amdi Bayram, the infamous Amdi Bayram. So Elvis Bayram was beaten up, obviously by thugs associated with Kurto Duduš, the SDSM candidate.
Right.
But, police ignores everything because SDSM has been, as of recently, in power. So they're not touching the case. And OSCE was also unperturbed. We have the guy attacks a person who works in the municipality, his underling, beats him up in his mayor's office while the guy is recording the attack on the phone and shares it to the press later. And you have an audio tape of Kurto threatening, I'm going to get a baseball bat, I'm going to go medieval on your ass, all that stuff. And while punching him, he's actually not just threatening, actually attacking the guy. And he also had another incident in which he verbally and, to the brink of physically assaulted some more distinguished organizer in the community or something like that. So now he goes to prison with all this, he goes to the court with all this baggage behind him. And the judge lets him off with a warning because he apologized. And everybody's like, come off. This is unbelievable. Even, given obviously the soft bigotry of low expectations regarding a Roma community and a Roma politician, it's still outrageous. I mean, Katice Janeva filed criminal charges against Nikola Gruevski for far, far less. So, to top this all off, Duduš issues a video statement to the person he attacked verbally and was released from, acquitted, despite all these other cases which should serve as, should guide the court to actually put him in prison. And Kurto sends out a statement to him, you're not a man, you're a woman, you come to my, this mafia statement. You're going to come, you're going to be sorry, I'm going to show you. 2 days after he was released from prison. A mayor of a Skopje municipality from SDSM.
Wow. Now, actually, one quick thing. You mentioned he had a baseball bat. Where do you buy baseball bats in Macedonia?
I don't know. He would improvise. I guess he would improvise.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, anyway, so the whole issue of general crime lawlessness that has, I honestly believe it has increased across the country in the past 3 years.
Yeah, definitely.
That's not good for anybody. So, anyway, let's see. Moving on here, we have elections coming up. We have elections coming up April 12. So that is, let's do the math, about 2.5 months from now. Parliament dissolves February 12, I believe. There is a lot of public sector hiring going on for both citizen and Dewey loyalists. I guess that's to be expected. We talked a little bit about what Zaev is going to try and campaign on, which is, give me 4 more years, I can do something. I'll do to the economy what I did to Macedonia's name, essentially. But I think that, and one other point here. I mentioned earlier the Economist magazine calling the people North Macedonians. I have to mention this first before we get into the elections. There was a food fair, I believe it was, in Berlin, and the Agriculture Ministry paid for signage and banners that said, quote-unquote, North Macedonian cuisine. So that's the government of Macedonia promoting, quote-unquote, North Macedonian fill-in-the-blank. There's a fair amount of blowback over that. Naturally, a lot of finger-pointing, from the flour mill that was being advertised to the ag ministry to the central government, etc. Not sure who's to blame. I think everybody's to blame there. But again, that's something that...
Gordana Siljanovska, the VMRO field presidential candidate, she said, this is evidence that these humiliations are not going to end. Every day brings another one. That's
right. Yeah, and I keep a list of instances that I find just perusing the web, especially with the media outlets that use the adjective North Macedonian, this and that, and I think I need to update that and publish that again, just because that is what Zoran Zaev has brought to Macedonia during his rule, as a change of the name, a change of the very identity of the Macedonian people, which I should say he's trying to engineer, and the Western elites are trying to engineer that as well. And so he wants to do to the economy what he has done to Macedonia's name, identity, the very dignity, to Gordana's point, of the Macedonian people. And I don't think, I'm just guessing here, going out on a limb, that the Macedonian people are going to look kindly upon that type of election campaign. I think they're going to be, from the center-right's position, they're going to be focusing on the economy and jobs, corruption, and the name, identity, and the dignity issue.
The people are aghast, and even Zaev is dropping the use of the name North Macedonia more and more often. Well, then you see some of his underlings, like there's this person who was head of the employment bureau under VMRO, from some minor party, who was then allied with VMRO. After a while, she was found to be a total loser and she was kicked out. But then Zaev brought her in. So now she's again head of the employment bureau under Zaev. And she gives a statement and she uses, in each sentence, she uses, North Macedonia 3 times. It's ridiculous. So Zaev has stopped using it, but these suck-ups, they want to use it even more so they can prove they're on his side.
Incredible. Well, and that actually I was looking at an article earlier today in one of the media outlets. Actually, no, it wasn't a media outlet. It was one of the think tanks or European institutions. I can't remember. And it was, the search function on a web page where you can click find and you type in a word. And it was just 3 or 4 paragraphs about something happening in Macedonia, an EU-related thing, and it had North Macedonia 13 times. Totally unnecessary. I think literally they do this just to try and rub it in. I guarantee you that that's what they are trying to do. And so I don't think Macedonians. I know Macedonians are fed up with it. Macedonians have a chance and a choice to overturn it and to return Macedonia's rightful and only name, as well as kind of set the ship aright. Begin to come to your senses and look at things that are important, which is jobs and the economy, and rooting out corruption. And I think that the April elections will be a chance for that to happen, and it just depends on what Macedonians want. More of the same or something better?
Изминативе 2,5 години Агенцијата за вработување на Република Северна Македонија активно работи на спроведување на мерки и политики кои што се во интерес на пазарот на труд на Република Северна Македонија, односно тенденцијата ни е во Република Северна Македонија да останат граѓаните на Република Северна Македонија, да ги пополнат работните места кои што ги имаат работодавачите и на Република Северна Македонија кои што ги планираат и се разбира ние Република Северна Македонија се вкупната поддршка во големи финансиски средства во многубројни активни мерки и политики на Република Северна Македонија. Работиме на тоа граѓаните на Република Северна Македонија, младите лица на Република Северна Македонија да ги задржиме во Република Северна Македонија. Ако во изминатите 2 години имавме рекордно голем буџет на Република Северна Македонија за активни мерки на Република Северна Македонија, политики на Република Северна Македонија, во 2019-та беше 1 милијарда и 100 денари со ребалансот на Република Северна Македонија, уште 200 милиони денари на Република Северна Македонија. Во 2020 година ќе стартуваме со 1 милијарда и 400 милиони денари на Република Северна Македонија, кои што се насочени за вработување на Република Северна Македонија, пополнување на работни места на Република Северна Македонија, токму на пазарот на труд во Република Северна Македонија.
And welcome back to the Macedonian Content Farmers podcast. This is Cvetin and Jason discussing the latest news from Macedonia and doing a proper rank Punditry podcast, which is now almost at the end. We've come to the point of the podcast where we do our farmers picks, choice of events and cultural things that have happened in or around Macedonia. So Jason, you have the floor.
Thanks. Yeah. Here we are, the middle of winter, unless of course you're in Australia. So I thought I would choose this one from the budgetsavvytravelers.com. These are people I follow, and they spend a lot of time in Macedonia. I like them because they talk about wonderful things coming out of Macedonia. And on this one, which is actually from last August, it's titled Struga Macedonia, Poetry, Bridge Jumping, Nightclubs, and Food! Exclamation point. And so basically they just highlight Struga and the area around Struga and Lake Ohrid, talk about the many wonderful things to do there. Obviously they talk about Struga as the city of poetry and their annual poetry festival that they have. The famous, the kids, the bridge jumpers, we've all been down there and seeing the kids jumping off the bridge into the Dream River. And it's just a nice feel-good article about the many wonderful things that Struga has to offer and the many wonderful things to do around Struga, typically in the summertime, but frankly anytime. But we'll put up a link to that on our in the description for the podcast. Cvetin, that is my farmer's pick. What is your farmer's pick?
Well, I'm just going to mention the possibly the end of an era for Macedonian handball. We do great now in club competitions, thanks to the Vardar team winning 2 out of the last 3 European championships, but the national team is sadly going on a decline with the expected retirement of Kira Lazarov, the main player and the biggest star. We had our great chance at the latest European championship, which was in between podcasts as we were 2 weeks ago, but Macedonia won the first game, but then lost the next 2 and dropped out, and it was visible that Kira Lazarov was leading the team best he could and had some great new hope on the goal on the goalpost, but ultimately it was not enough, and we crashed out, especially in the last match, and now everybody's obviously worried that this would be the last time we've seen Lazarov lead the team on a global championship, and there's unfortunately really no replacing the guy. There are some great players, but nobody who could approach this level. So we are now in our best competitive sport, but we had a very announcement of a possibly a bleak intermediate future.
Yeah, well, we'll that's a good point, and Kirill has been a fantastic ambassador for Macedonia through his many years of playing, and who knows what he'll do next. I guess we'll have to see, but I'm sure he will continue to be an ambassador for Macedonia in whatever whatever capacity he moves to next. But that's a good one. We wish him well.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Yeah.
All right, well, that is a full wrap. Good rank punditry episode, and some good news there at the end, which we always like to finish on. And next week is the last week of January. We'll see what it brings, and go from there.
Yeah. Hopefully some interesting news coming soon.
Yeah, it's Macedonia. It's always interesting news.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Okay,
Great talking to you.
Take care.
Yeah, you too.